Probably most of you do too. You all have books that meant a lot to you when you're growing up, or maybe even now, books that really impacted you. Maybe for you it's movies. Maybe for you it might be puppets. I don't know. I've got a lot of puppet movies. That's a long story, but I do have quite a few of those. We tend to like a good story. That generally tends to be true. When I was growing up, there were certain kinds of stories that really, really grabbed me. And I can remember being probably in elementary school and discovering reading. And for a while there, I could not get enough horse books or dog books. I read every horse book and dog book there ever was. How many of you have ever read this book? It's Misty of Chickantee. I read Misty. I read Windy, Stormy, Breezy, Partly Cloudy. There's a whole series of them. I read all of them. This is a great, great series of books about a couple of children and their horse. The Black Stallion. I read every single book in that series. That was a great series of books about a horse, a boy and a horse. I love that book. I also love dog books. So Big Red, so Old Yeller, Where the Red Fern Grows. So all those books, I read those books. I devoured those books. I would go back and I'd read maybe 2 or 3 a week and go back and get more out of the library and just read because I loved those books. I loved a good story. And then, as I got older, I wasn't so much those books anymore. I stopped reading Big Red so often and instead of moving on to other things. Maybe, Tale of Two Cities, liked that book. So, Les Miserables, I loved this book. So, a lot of stuff about French glass making. But it was a fascinating book. And The Brothers Karamazov, ever read that? No? So, liked that book. Robinson Crusoe, J.R. Tolkien, and The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit. I read those books. Read these books so many times I could actually quote passages out of them. I was kind of a nerd in high school, but I really, really enjoyed those books. And then after becoming a Christian, of course, I picked up this book. So this is my Bible, and it's I'll tell you it's seen better days. But I'll take it out. I got to be kind of careful because if I'm not careful, it'll fall apart. But this is the book I found myself reading more and more and more. I read it a lot, so I do tend to leave myself notes in it. I write in it quite a bit. So I know I was like, ooh, I wrote in a book. So it's if Jesus strikes me down, just stay back. It'll be fine. But I read this book a lot. So I still read this book a lot. I don't read some of these books so much anymore. I spend more time now on the internet, and if it says like click through the second page, you can forget it. I'm not gonna. 2 paragraphs is all I can deal with. But I do read this book still quite a bit. The Bible that actually Ellen's parents gave me over 30 years ago. But I love a good story. I love stories. That's always true. And I think the reason we love good stories is, or what makes a story good maybe would be a better way to put it, is because those stories have points. They go somewhere, right? They have a goal. There's something the book is working towards. It has an end. It has a purpose. It has a reason for being, and it works its way out and plays itself out in a certain way. So like the horse books. Spoiler alert, if you haven't read these, I won't wreck it for you, but the boy gets the horse. Okay? So you can rest assured. So boy and girl get the horse, then set it free. It's very sad, but wonderful at the same time. So, Big Red, boy gets the dog. Old Yeller, boy shoots the dog. So, depends on the book, right? So, it's this series of books, right? The bad guy gets what's coming to him. So, this book, the good guy gets what's coming to him at the end. It takes a while to get there. So, but eventually he gets what's coming to him. So. And goes through a lot of trouble in between. So if you don't like the book, there's a movie, right? And it's very moving and touching, a musical. So I tried to watch it once, and I'm doing this about halfway through, so it's not they wrecked the book. Nothing about the glasswork industry at all in that book. So, but anyway, and then this book, of course. And at the end of this book, God gets what's coming to him. And we're going to talk about that today. Because in this book, in a sense, you could say God gets what's coming to him. And we're going to talk about how that happens. And it actually happens here in this place on Sabbath morning. So let's think about that together. I want you to think about that with me as we go through that. And we're going to take a look at 2 Corinthians. That's the book we're in today. We're in 2 Corinthians. Chapter 3, verses 12 through 18. Page number, I'm going to call that out if you want to. I think we're going to have, oh, look at that. You don't even have to look it up if you don't want to. It's going to be right on the screen behind me. So if I make a mistake or say something wrong, you can scream out, no, Pastor Matt, blasphemy, and pray against me while you're sitting there if you want to, whatever makes you happy. So we're going to read this passage, and I want you to understand before we get into it that in this worn-out old Bible, God gets what's coming to him. That's what I told you, right? That's the point of this, is at the end, God gets what's coming to him. What does God have coming to him, though? What belongs to God? What does God, I mean, if you believe in God, everything, obviously, God owns everything, he is everything, he's big, right? He made the whole world. If you don't believe in God, then maybe not so much. But if you're a believer, then you might answer, like, in a sense, everything. But there's something specific that I have in mind. You see, what I have in mind is the reason we are here this morning. Because we worship God to give him glory. You might say that the fruit of worship is glory. The fruit of worship is glory. And when we worship, you're going to love this because you'll remember it, and I want you to remember it. God's glory is the story. When we worship, God's glory is the story. On Sabbath day, God's glory is the story. That's the goal. That's the end. That's what we're working towards. And we're looking at 2 Corinthians 3, 12 through 18 to sort of unpack that a little bit. So if you'll turn with me to 2 Corinthians 3, we'll take a look at that. Now, I'll give you a little context because I always tell you context. Text without context is pretext, right? So I don't want you just to think we're just going to start out from the middle of nowhere. Paul is writing to a church in Corinth, and he wants them to understand some things that they're struggling with. And one of the things he wants to understand is this idea of being part of a new covenant. And in this new covenant, this new agreement, this new relationship with God, they are to be, they're to have a relationship with God which leads to them bringing God glory. So that they will, in turn, find their hope in Jesus Christ. So that's basically what the first part of chapter 3 is talking about. And we're going to kind of pick up from there. Right? Their goal is to bring God glory, and their hope is in Jesus Christ. And having, therefore, such a hope, he says, beginning in verse 12, we use great boldness in our speech, and are not as Moses, who used to put a veil over his face, that the sons of Israel might not look intently at the end of what was fading away. He's referencing an Old Testament story here. When Moses and the people of Israel were wandering in the wilderness, actually at this point he was just leading them out of Egypt towards the Promised Land. I don't think they'd messed up quite that level yet. But Moses would go before God. He would stand before God, and God would talk to Moses. And Moses would do that up on a mountain, perhaps, or in a tent, where in a tabernacle they called it, where God's presence was. And when he came out, his face would be shining. It would be reflecting God's glory so much that it would shine. And this, as you can imagine, if someone comes to you with their face was like emitting a light, it'd probably freak you out a little bit, right? So it freaked me out a little bit. If Phil came to my house tomorrow and his face was like lit up, I don't know what I'd do. It'd be weird. So it freaked him out a little bit. And so Moses would wear a veil over his face so they wouldn't see it. And Paul suggested, actually, in the part we just kind of breezed through, he said, first of all, but Moses did that in order to protect the Israelites, because the Israelites didn't like it. They didn't like what it looked like. It gave them the heebie-jeebies, and so he would cover his face. But he also did, he said, because he didn't want them also to realize that when he wasn't right before God like that glory eventually faded. And so less and less of that glory was reflected, and so his face became less and less lit up or whatever, so he'd wear this veil to kind of conceal that. So that's what he's talking about. So we are not as Moses, who used to put a veil over his face that the sons of Israel might not look intently at the end of what was fading away. That's the glory fading. But their minds were hardened. For until this very day, at the reading of the Old Covenant, the same veil remains unlifted, because it is removed in Christ. All he's saying here is this. The people of Israel didn't want to look at Moses because the glory of God was reflected. It kind of bothered them. It was a little creepy. And Moses didn't want to unveil it because he didn't want people to see that glory was fading, he says. And now that glory is found in Jesus Christ. And if you don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ, you can't reflect that glory. And that veil that the people wanted between them and God to kind of separate them from his glory, he says, is still there. That veil's not been lifted. They still can't see God's glory because they haven't come to Christ. And until they come to Christ, that veil won't be lifted. That veil will remain. That thing blocking them from seeing or absorbing or knowing or experiencing God's true full glory. It says that it lies over their hearts. Their hearts are hardened. They have hardened minds and hardened hearts. And they rejected God's glory. Jesus removes that veil. If you've read the New Testament at all, you know that when Jesus died, there's a big, huge curtain between the Holy of Holies, where God is said to dwell, and the rest of the temple. And when Jesus dies, what happens to the curtain? Tears in two, right? Rips in half. It falls down. It's gone. And that symbolized the idea that when Jesus died, that veil, that thing blocking us from beholding or being before God's glory, is taken away. It says, but the people who don't accept Christ, the Israelites who rejected that, they're still there. They're still not experiencing that full glory. But whenever a man turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away. Again, we just talked about that. Whenever a man turns to the Lord, whenever a woman, man, person, whoever turns to the Lord, that veil is taken away. They're able to actually experience or come before or stand in the presence of God's glory. Now, the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. But we all, and that liberty refers to the freedom we have to come before Christ, to come before God's glory, to stand boldly before God's throne. But we all, with unveiled face, the veil's been removed for us, we've come to Christ. If you're a Christian, you believe that. One of the things you believe as a Christian is that the veil is removed. If you're not a Christian, then you hear this and think, maybe that's a little weird, but it's something Christians believe, that we are able to clearly experience or have a relationship with Jesus and therefore with God. And so we're able to know God. And where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. But we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed in the same image from glory to glory, just as from the Lord, the Spirit. And in this passage, he contrasts, or compares and contrasts, three people, one person, two groups. Israel's veiled, he says. Hardened hearts, hardened mind, rejected God's glory, haven't come to Christ. Moses, veiled to hide the fading glory and to spare the Israelites. And disciples, that's us, people who follow Christ, unveiled. And because we're unveiled, hopeful, bold, and free to behold God's glory and to thus bring God glory. Worship transforms us. That's why worship is so important to Christians. That's why Christians come to church. That's why you come to church, in case you were wondering. You might have got up this morning thinking, why am I coming to church again? So it's partly to see me, let's be honest here, but really we're coming to church to glorify God. That's why we're here. We're here to give God or bring God glory, to reflect that glory that God has given to us back at God, to lift his name up, to make him great. Because worship transforms us, makes us hopeful. We learn in 2 Corinthians, makes us bold, makes us free to glorify God. And the fruit of worship is glory, and when we worship, God's glory is the story. That's why we're here. That's the point of this book. That's what this book is working towards. It's working towards the glorification of God. And so at the end of this book, God gets what's coming to him, right? He gets glory. If you look in Revelation, every other word in Revelation just about is glory. Glory to God, glory, 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 God, glory, glory, God, God, glory, glory, glory. It's because that's what it's working towards, God's glory. Because in this book, God's glory is the story. That's what he's working towards, the glorification of himself. And you think, well, that's kind of, I don't know, it's sort of, I don't walk around trying to glorify myself. And that's true enough. We don't want to walk around saying, aren't I great, aren't I awesome, look at me. Is that how you walk now? Anna, you got street cred, is that right? So, yeah. So we don't, I'm so great. But we think that's strange, but we're not God, right? So if I'm not the all-powerful being, that sounds a little odd. But if you're the all-powerful being, then I guess it's okay to say, you owe me glory because that's part of who you are. So it's okay. It's understandable. And so God's goal is to have us worship, glorify him. And so when we worship, God's glory is the story. We're part of a story, you and I. We're part of a story in which God is working towards the end of all things, when he will be glorified, and as a matter of fact, when we will be glorified too. when we will become fully and completely the people that God has called us to be. And worship is sort of a test run of that. It's sort of a practice session for us. It's sort of a glimpse of heaven in a way, of us gathered around God's throne to glorify and worship and honor him. And so when it comes to Sabbath day, when it comes to worshiping, God's glory is the story. That's what we're here for. That's our purpose. That's why we're here. Just as in this book, the purpose is to work to the point where the boy gets the dog, and ends up making the dog a champion, and it's lovely. You'll cry. Or they set the horse free. It's also you'll cry. Or the black where he gets the horse, you'll cry. So there's you cry. I read a lot of weepy books. It's kind of a girl or something. So anyway, but. The whole point, though, is working towards a point. That's God's glory. That's what we're working towards. It's his people. We want to glorify God, give him glory and honor and praise. That's why we do what we do. That's why we come here. And if your friends ever wonder why you come here, you can tell them. What can you tell them? God's glory is the story. So, right? That's why you come here. You come here to glorify God, to honor him, to give him praise. That's why you're here today. That's why we're here every Sabbath day. And I want you to grow in that. I want you to become better at that. I want you to grow up into that idea of giving God glory. And so today I have 3 possible things that you can do over the next month to 3 months in order to make sure that God's glory is a story on Sabbath day. Here's the first one. I've already given you this challenge before, and some of you have taken it and done quite well, so I'm going to give it again. Make it your goal to attend worship 75% of the time over the next 3 months. That means that if there are 4 weeks in the month, 4 Sabbaths in the month, how many Sabbaths are you going to be in church? 7, right. Who said 7? It's 3. So 3. Okay, if there's 4, you're going to be here 3. So 75% of the time. Now some of you are like, yeah, all right, I got that. So I'm here 100% of the time. My dad works here. I can't go anywhere else on Saturday, so I'm stuck. Okay, so I understand that. So some of you are kind of or I'm dating his daughter, and I got to show up because if I don't, then So some of you have got that down, 100% thing where you're doing better than 75%. I get that. So here's something else you can do if you've already got that. You can volunteer to take part in worship over the next 8 weeks. There are a lot of things that happen during worship. There's worship leading. There is singing. There is the praise band. There's AV junk going on in the back. There's greeting going on over there. There's ushering. There's all kinds of stuff happening during the service. So maybe over the next 8 weeks, you could dip your toe in the water and help lead us in worship. And you can approach me and say, "Hey, Pastor Ben, I'd like to help lead worship in some way. I'd like to help take part in worship." And so you can do that and therefore make God's glory the story. Some of you are like, I have both of those. I'm here all the time. So I have no friends, no life, I have nothing better to do, so on Saturday, that's where I am. So I already volunteer, I do this thing, I'm all there. So I got something for you too. Bring a friend to church with you in April. Now, I didn't say invite a friend, you'll notice, because any goober can do that. I said bring a friend to church in April. So if you've got the first 2 already, bring a friend to church in April. Now, bring a church to friend. That'd be awesome. So I got a church here for you. It's right in my pocket. But now Bethany's back there like, yeah. So yeah. So Lizzie's there too. She's like, I'm gonna write that one down. I'm doing that. So some of you have already done this. That's awesome. But for those of you who haven't, Melinda, so you can bring a friend. So make sure you're here 75% of the time in the month if that's something you're not good at yet. But if you're good at that, next step. God's glory is a story. The next step is to volunteer to take part in the worship someplace, not just to be a pew warmer, but to actually do something to help lead us into worship. Or if you already do that, or if that's not your bag for some reason, then you can bring a friend in April. And I want you to do that not for my glory, but for whose glory? And why is that? Because glory is the story. I told you to remember that. You're going to hate me this week when you think about that. And that's how you can bear the fruit of the worship, which is glorifying God, so as to make God's glory the story. And that's all I got to say about that. Amen. Oh, I have one more thing to say. I almost forgot. This is very important. As you leave today, I'm going to be standing there with a bunch of envelopes in my hand, and I'm going to give you a little stick figure. It's going to be pink. It might be doing this. It might be doing this. So, but whatever it's doing, I want you to write down what you've chosen to do of those three options, and I want you to staple it to the board, the bulletin board. Amber did a beautiful new bulletin board out there. It says attend on the front of our church. I want you to staple that little stick figure on there or pin it on there and write out what you intend to do. If you're going to, you can write 75%, we'll know what that means. You can write lead in worship, we'll know what that means. You can write bring a friend, we'll know what that means. Just write it on there, stick it up on the bulletin board so we can see that you're going to take action and we can be encouraged by your choice, your decision to make God's glory the story. Very nice.